Hey everyone, today I want to talk about trusting God in the midst of uncertainty. Life can throw us into situations where we feel overwhelmed or inadequate, but the story of Gideon from the Bible shows us how God can work through our doubts and fears to accomplish great things. Gideon's story starts during a tough time for Israel. They were being oppressed by the Midianites and the people lived in fear, hiding from their enemies. Gideon was no exception. When we first meet him in Judges 6, he's hiding in a winepress, threshing wheat in secret to avoid the Midianites. Gideon was afraid, like many of us are when we face situations that feel too big for us. But that's when God steps in. An angel of the Lord appears to Gideon and calls him something unexpected: a mighty warrior. Gideon's reaction? Confusion. He's like, who, me? How can I save Israel? I'm from the weakest clan and I'm the least in my family. But God wasn't looking at Gideon's status, he was looking at what he could do through Gideon's willingness to trust him. Even though Gideon was unsure, he wanted to believe. So he asked God for a sign. He put out a fleece on the ground and asked God to make the fleece wet with dew while the ground around it remained dry. And God did it. But even then, Gideon wasn't completely sure, so he asked for another sign. This time for the fleece to be dry and the ground wet. And God patiently gave him that sign too. Now, fully convinced that God was with him, Gideon prepared to fight the Midianites. But God had one more test for him. God told Gideon to reduce his army from 32,000 men to just 300. It didn't make sense, but God wanted to show that the victory would come from his power, not the strength of the army. So Gideon trusted God, even in this moment of great uncertainty. Armed with nothing but trumpets, torches, and jars, Gideon's 300 men surrounded the Midianite camp at night. When they blew their trumpets and broke the jars, the Midianites were thrown into confusion and turned on each other. Gideon's small army didn't even have to fight. God gave them the victory. Gideon's story teaches us that we don't need to have all the answers or feel strong to be used by God. In fact, it's in our weakness and uncertainty that God often shows his greatest power. Gideon went from hiding in fear to leading a small army to victory, all because he learned to trust God, even when things didn't make sense. Maybe you're facing a situation right now that feels overwhelming or uncertain. You might be wondering, how can I possibly handle this? But just like with Gideon, God is with you. He sees beyond your doubts and fears, and he's ready to show his strength through your faith. All he asks is that you trust him, even when the outcome seems uncertain.